Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And when it comes to influential Brexiteers, you could sort of, I suppose, put them into one of three groups. One would be the Brexiteers who've actually delivered the Brexit we are now suffering from. These would be Boris Johnson's cabinet ministers, the Conservative MPs who actually could have done something about it and delivered this and were perfectly happy with this. Second would be the ones who were always on the sidelines. So these are the ones who may have influenced proceedings at various points but had no direct control over policy, like, for example, Nigel Farage, Aaron Banks and so on. Then your other group are the ones who were very influential in policy setting for, several years of Brexit, but are no longer. So when it came to the end of it, they didn't actually have the decision-making powers. One of these would absolutely be the first Brexit Secretary, David Davis, who has carried out a rather extraordinary interview in which he sets out why he thinks Brexit has gone so badly. Oh, it's totally not his fault, and why he thinks it will work out in the end. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, about David Davis, first of all, he's not an Etonian, or even from the upper middle classes as such. He didn't have a particularly privileged upbringing as far as I can tell, and so doesn't fit in with most of the senior members of this Brexiteer government who are extremely entitled and privileged. However, they do accept him. Now, one of my most viewed videos was about this Etonian attitude that has led towards the Brexit madness. A deliberate style of education that instills in their pupils incredible levels of self-belief. Now, ordinarily, we would say this is a good thing. All too often, people fail, and I've seen this as a teacher no end of times. People fail because they lack confidence. They believe that they cannot overcome a challenge, and so they lose before they've even tried because they never actually try. The problem is that the Etonian levels of confidence take no account of success or failure. It doesn't, for example, teach you to reflect upon failures and learn from them to become stronger. It doesn't accept that you can fail as long as you're confident enough. And when pursuing a challenge, it's absolutely essential we believe in ourselves, that we back ourselves to do it. But where there are stumbles, you also need to consider them, to accept them, to learn from them and grow stronger. Etonians, from the evidence we can see, don't really do that. If something goes wrong, it doesn't cause them any harm. They don't suffer the negative impacts of failing. These people are completely shielded by the impact of failure, and so they have no motivation to use it and learn lessons. It's a sort of toxic confidence that is no good at all in government. Because although there are no consequences to them, there are consequences to the rest of us when they fail. David Davis did not receive an Etonian education, but he absolutely has that mindset. He impressed the Conservative grandees in his younger days, and it was said of him that he had more confidence than anyone outside of an Eton education. And confidence is what impresses these people. It's almost like it's the only virtue for them. The problem is that David Davis is not that bright. He hasn't got that Herculean level of confidence, but with the benefit of introspective critical thinking. So you put him in charge of anything, and just like an Etonian, it will be a complete disaster. And it was his job to begin the negotiations with the EU on a withdrawal agreement. He was made Brexit Secretary by Theresa May. She made sure she put in place undoubted Brexiteers into the key positions to drive it all forward. He proceeded to try to fly to the wrong place for these negotiations. He was all set to go off to these talks. And here's the thing. I mean, anyone can take a wrong turn when you go into a meeting in an unfamiliar place. Absolutely. But David Davis tried to go to the wrong country. He thought he was going to Germany. People had to point out, no, the EU is based in Belgium, Mr. Davis. I thought Germany was... No. Then he famously posed for photographs with Michel Barnier. First meeting, all smiles, grinning like a Cheshire cat. And there he was with Michel Barnier and Michel Barnier's close aides with a stack of notes to work through, David Davis had nothing. The aide to his right, you can see, has a small notebook, which isn't even open, suggesting that there's nothing inside it to refer to. So on to the interview itself anyway. My immediate thought was Davis doesn't seem to think that not knowing a blind thing about the EU and not having any notes to illuminate him were drawbacks. Granted, he didn't seem to be asked this, which makes me question the value of the interviewer, actually, because there were certain questions, obvious questions, that didn't seem to be asked. But the interview may, in theory, be an interesting insight into the internal workings of key Conservatives at the time. Because, you know, when it comes to the Brexit that we have now, it's entirely down to them. It's the Conservatives that brought it. There were other groups as well arguing for Brexit, but it's the Conservative Party that's brought it. The gobshites like Nigel Farage had no direct input. Yes, his threat to the Conservatives in 2019 absolutely would have influenced their direction in choosing Boris Johnson to succeed Theresa May, and in Boris Johnson choosing to shift the party very far to the right to counter Nigel Farage. But Farage had no direct control over policy. This was down to the Conservative members of the government, and most notably Theresa May and Boris Johnson, of course. In the interview, David Davis talks about being blindsided by Theresa May a few times. Now, he's giving this impression that he was proceeding a particular way, and it was all agreed, and this is what we were going to do. And then May said everything had changed without even discussing things with him. Now, what he's claiming here is that the Prime Minister made policy decisions regarding a government department without first discussing it with the head of that government department. Now, if this is what really happened, and you can't, in theory, rule anything out, then why did David Davis remain in post for some time after this, for a long time after this? Because if I was Secretary of State and a policy was forced upon me or my department without consulting me, I can understand that the Prime Minister will occasionally overrule. But to have not even discussed it first, that would be severely undermining me. I would resign and be very clear about why. Very much like Sajid Javid when he resigned as Chancellor under Boris Johnson. It was because Boris Johnson was forcing something on him, and he said, nah, I've got self-respect, mate, not having it. David Davis was therefore giving the impression that he has no self-respect, except, of course, he did resign a long time later on something else. So it's not just like we can view it that he just wanted the position and, you know, he doesn't care how much he's undermined. He just likes being Secretary of State, which makes me a little bit sceptical of the claim. Then something that cannot possibly be true, because the first one may be, I don't know, it just seems unlikely. Another point, absolutely untrue. So one of the biggest impacts of Brexit is, of course, on Northern Ireland. David Davis claims that the government were assured that there would not need to be any changes to the way things were handled with Northern Ireland and that existing procedures could still be used. He claims that he was told this by the heads of both the British and the Irish Customs and Revenue Service. He said that those senior officials told him that this would be the case. He said that this guidance apparently changed towards the end of 2017, which was after the general election where Theresa May lost her majority in the general election of that year. And a year before he resigned his position. So a long time still to go. So he's trying to claim that someone somewhere must have changed their minds and that his careful planning over Brexit was scuppered because of that. This then led to the backstop, which he inevitably blames for the whole project coming crashing down. Now, obviously, I cannot say what he was and wasn't told by senior customs officials unless it's recorded and I've seen it. What I can say is there is no legal way to exit from a customs union with the EU or frankly with anyone and not have a customs border in place to manage it. That's just a fact. That's all there is to it. Customs borders exist between customs areas, just like national borders exist between national areas. It's also a likely fact that the head of the Irish Revenue and Customs and the head of the British Revenue and Customs understand how customs work. I'm going to guess that the people who run customs in their respective countries sort of understand how customs work. It is extremely unlikely that the heads of either organisation wouldn't actually understand how customs arrangements work between one customs area and another. It is perplexingly, bafflingly, surely impossible that both of them would have been ignorant. If anything changed in 2017, it will absolutely not have been this advice, but the fact that there was a time when we were not going to leave the customs union and single market, and then we were. And 2017 was the time when an awful lot of things which were being mulled over suddenly became firm policy. The Conservatives chose that path, and therefore they chose to make sure that customs arrangements would have been needed. If they were being advised that a special customs arrangement wouldn't have been needed, that would have been on the basis that we wouldn't have left the customs union. So you can read interviews like this, along with the one from former Chancellor Philip Hammond recently, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think, and you can wonder which parts are true and which parts are just them trying to rewrite history to put themselves in a better light. I would say that with all politicians, doesn't matter how much regard or disregard I have for them, I think it's always going to be a mixture of the two. But what we have here is a mix of things being claimed, which may or may not be true, may or may not be candidly objective facts. But because he's claimed something which cannot possibly be true, I would say it highlights two things. One, at no point has David Davis ever understood Brexit. If he cannot understand the basic concept of trading arrangements between two different customs areas, then he understands nothing of value when it comes to Brexit. Because if he did understand this, and he wanted to use the interview to rescue his reputation, he would not have claimed something that is objectively a lie. He could have claimed something that is a lie, but it's hard to pin it down because at the end of the day, he's talking about discussions with people that were not recorded. But you wouldn't say something that cannot possibly be true. I can believe that he genuinely thought that no special arrangements would have been needed for Northern Ireland. I can believe that when he came up with this lie for the interview, he didn't realise it's an obvious lie. What cannot be the case is that he got his little area of ignorance fed to him by the heads of any nation's customs and revenue department, much less that of the UK and Ireland. The second thing I think this shows is that the early players in this Brexit farce, that third group of people I talked about at the start, who were very instrumental in the path that Brexit took, but did not have any control over the end phase, would absolutely wish to distance themselves from the realities of it. This I read as David Davis trying to claim it would have all been marvellous were it not for others. It's the sort of thing Nigel Farage does all the time, of course, but with David Davis, he was instrumental. He did get to decide things. So it's basically him saying, yeah, but the things I decided would have been fine. It's the things that were decided after my time. You know, we had Philip Hammond saying that a softer line could have been taken at one point as well. I don't know whether or not that is true, but that is again clearly him trying to suggest that actually we could have had a reasonable Brexit if we'd have just taken this line that I was in favour of. Because Philip Hammond also used the line that Theresa May overruled him as well quite a lot. In fact, you'd get the impression that Theresa May was at loggerheads with her cabinet throughout the entire process, in which case, why did this cabinet remain in place for so long? Anyone that has been heavily involved in the process but now is not will absolutely be keen to untangle themselves from the mess that is unfolding right now. Wouldn't surprise me to see others doing the same in time. To me, what it shows is a fear that they understand that Brexit won't actually get any better. They know it's not teething problems. They know it's not going to get any better. And they must insist that it would have been fine if they had got to decide things. And then when people say to them, but you did get to decide things, they need to be able to say, ah, yeah, but I was overruled. But for some reason, I didn't resign my position, even though I was being completely undermined for a very long period of time. So that's it. That's my reading of the interview. By all means, read it yourself and tell me what you think. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.